Hi everyone, it's Tarrant.
And Stella from the Dice Tower. Thanks for joining us.
Today we'll be teaching you how to play MORPHO, game designed by Jeffrey CCH and published by IceMakes. We are using a prototype copy here of the game, and so the rules and components may not be final.
Let's get to it.
MORPHO is a social deduction game for 3 to 9 players, set in a fractured and dystopian world. Over a series of rounds, players will have different jobs, and many will be loyal to the MORPHO organisation. But many will not, some looking to desert, and others looking for something even more sinister. Players need to use their skills and information to figure out who's who and try to meet their faction's win condition, earning victory points for their troubles, and the first player to 10 victory points will win the game. Through this video, we're going to step you through the various different modes of play in the following order. First, we'll show you the basic version of the game at 7 to 9 players. Then, the basic mode at 4 to 6 players, and then at 3 players. Then we'll show you the extra cards and challenges which are introduced in the expert mode of the game. The game of MORPHO comes with 21 coloured ID cards and 21 grey indication cards. These cards are an identical set other than the colours. The coloured ID cards represent the hidden roles that the players will have, and these will be shuffled up and distributed among the players. For each ID card that you shuffle into the deck at the start of the game, you'll put the matching indication card face up on the table, and this helps to remind all players exactly which roles are in the game and how many there are. In the basic mode of the game, you will not be using the green or purple ID cards. These are all the advanced cards, and those are kept in the box. To set up, assemble the deck of ID cards based on this table in the rulebook for your player count. There should be one more card than there are players. Shuffle the cards and deal 1 to each player, leaving the last card face down in the middle of the table. Players may look at their own cards. Lay out the matching set of indication cards. Keep the 2 black block tokens nearby and then choose a first player. The other tokens are only used in the expert game. You're now ready to play. A round of MORPHO is played in turns, starting from the first player and going clockwise around the table until somebody has met a win condition. On your turn, you can take one action. You can look at another player's card, swap your card with the one in the middle, or use your card's action. For the first option, simply choose another player, excluding one of the players sitting adjacent to you, and have a look at their card without showing any other players. For the second option, simply swap your card with the one in the center of the table. You can't look at the central card before you do this, but you can look at it once you've picked it up. The third option is to use your ID's active ability, and you cannot do this on your first turn. An active ability is indicated by the exclamation mark on your card, and not all roles have an active ability. In the basic game, only the leader, killer, and deserter has one. The first step of using an active ability is to flip your card face up, if not already, identify which ability you're using, and identify the target. For some abilities, the target will be yourself. Next, before resolving the ability, you need to check whether there are any passive abilities, indicated by this arrow on a player's ID card, which will interfere with this active ability. There may be relevant passive abilities on the target player's ID card, or the ID cards of the target player's neighbours. To work out whose resolves first, you'll first check with the target player, then the player to the target player's left, then the player to the target player's right. If you do not have a relevant passive ability, then you simply state that you have no relevant passive ability and leave your card face down. If you do have a relevant passive ability, then you must use it, and you must now flip your ID card face up to use that ability. Once one of the 3 possible players has used a passive ability, all others do not have to. Next, resolve the effect or effects of those abilities. Finally, any ID card revealed for its passive ability is flipped back over. This does not apply to active ability cards. So now let's have a look at all of the different active and passive abilities that you'll encounter in the basic game. First is the leader, whose active ability is to activate mission. Completing a successful mission is one of the ways for all of the blue MORPHO players to win the round. When you activate mission, you simply reveal it and announce it, but do nothing else immediately. You'll then have to wait until your next turn, and on your next turn you must indicate one other player trying to find the technician. If you're successful, then MORPHO wins the round. But if you indicate the wrong player, or there's no technician remaining at this point of the game, then the mission fails, and all killers win the round instead. The killer has an active ability called Snipe, and this is an attempt to eliminate one of the other IDs from the game. Simply choose your target, and if that target is not guarded, then it is eliminated. The target of a snipe is guarded if one or more of its neighbouring IDs has the guard passive ability. Here, if the killer targeted this ID, this bodyguard would reveal, and the killer who tried to snipe would instead be eliminated. The killers can win the round by eliminating the leader, and MORPHO can win the round by having all the killers eliminated. The basic game's other role is the deserter, and the deserter tries to win the game by escaping from MORPHO. If the deserter uses this ability and the escape attempt is not intercepted, then the deserter wins immediately. But if one of the deserter's neighbours has the intercept passive ability present on both the bodyguard and the leader, then the deserter is instead eliminated. The final active ability is block, which the killers have, and this ability cannot be cancelled by any other passive ability. To take this, the killer places one of the 2 block tokens between any pair of players around the board. While the token is there, these 2 IDs are not considered adjacent for any active or passive abilities. So, for example, if this deserter now tried to escape, this leader would not be able to intercept. When an ID is eliminated, it is always revealed and then placed onto its indication card, so you'll always know which IDs remain in the game. Any block tokens which were adjacent to that ID are removed from play. And the adjacency of IDs is shuffled so that the new nearest players become adjacent for all purposes in the game. A player whose ID has been eliminated cannot score victory points for this round, even if their team does ultimately win the round. Once a team meets its winning condition, then all living players on that team gain a number of victory point tokens based on the number of these marks in the top right corner. Once again, those win conditions for MORPHO are to have a successful mission or eliminate all killers. For the killers, it's to see the mission fail or to eliminate the leader. And for a deserter, it's to escape without being intercepted. If there are multiple deserters at your player count, then each is playing its own game. Only one of them can win. Players continue playing rounds until one player has reached a total of 10 points. The player with the highest score wins, and if tied, whoever scored the most points in the final round wins, and if still tied, whoever was latest in the final turn order breaks the tie. When playing MORPHO with between 4 and 6 players, each player will be dealt 2 ID cards instead of 1. There'll still be 1 card in the centre. The positioning of your cards is important. You can't rearrange them during the game. When using the investigation action, which is where you look at another player's ID card, you are allowed to look at the non-neighbouring IDs of your neighbouring players, but not the neighbouring IDs. That is, this player cannot look at these 2 cards, but can look at any of the other 6 cards. When considering active or passive abilities, adjacency is based on adjacent players, not adjacent IDs. So, for example, if I'd played a block token, it would go between two players, not between the two IDs of the same player. And if one of this player's IDs were targeted by a snipe, then a guard in either of this player's or this player's IDs could be used to defend it. If one of the player's two IDs is eliminated through the game, then that player will simply play with one ID from that point forward. If your two IDs are such that one is from MORPHO and one is a killer, then your IDs are in conflict. While they're in conflict, you cannot take any active abilities or passive abilities with those cards. Essentially, they remain face down, and you're only allowed to take the investigation action or use your action to swap out one of the cards with the center of the table. Additionally, if your cards are still in conflict when the round is over, you won't score any victory points, even if one of your cards was on the winning team. When you take a turn, even if you have two ID cards, you still only take a single action. You're treated as one player with two IDs. Finally, to win as a deserter in the 4 to 6 player game, both of your ID cards must show deserter if you still have two IDs. And when you attempt the escape action, you must reveal both of your IDs to confirm that this is the case. If you're reduced to a single ID as the deserter, then you are allowed to use that to escape. There is one further rule change at 3 players. Now, for the purposes of active and passive abilities, adjacency is determined individually for each ID card rather than player by player. So, for example, if this ID tried to snipe this card, it could only be guarded if a bodyguard were here or here. This bodyguard here would not be able to defend. This also now means that the killer's block ability can place a block token between two IDs of the same player, something not allowed in the 4 to 6 player game. The expert version of MORPHO introduces 7 new roles, 3 from the green alien faction and 4 from the purple outsider faction. The setup table will call for one unknown role, and so to do this, first identify all of these roles which match your player count, choose the ones you wish to play with, because you don't have to choose all of them, and then add one deserter to that pack, shuffle them up, and then randomly choose one to add to your deck of role cards. Since no one knows which of the roles was picked, you'll have to lay out all of the indication cards for that secondary deck at the start of the game. The alien roles are tough to play and are worth a high number of victory points, and each of them has a lock icon in the top left corner, meaning you're not allowed to swap this role with the center of the table. If you have 2 ID cards, then an alien doesn't conflict with any of the other colors, but it does invalidate your other card. So, even though this is a killer, you would not be able to use either of its active abilities, nor would you win by its win condition, if the other killer were to win. The cyborg's snipe ability works the same way as the killer, and the cyborg's goal is to eliminate the technician. The psionics player wins by perceiving all identities. This means to take the active ability perceive, and then correctly identify each ID card remaining in the game. The other players need to be careful about revealing too many roles if there's a risk of a psionics player in play. If the psionics player makes any error, then each other player earns 1 victory point. The psionics player can also do a body swap with another player as an active ability, swapping the ID card with that other player's card. The receiving player flips psionics face down, but also receives the green body swap token, disallowing that player from doing body swap again. The parasite is trying to escape, much like the deserter, and has an active ability called Parasite Escape, which works in the same way as the deserter's escape and can be intercepted in the same way. The only difference is when you've got 2 ID cards. A deserter has to reveal 2 deserters to take the escape, while the parasite needs to reveal only the 1 parasite card. The parasite also has a passive ability called Parasite Transmit. If another player does the investigate action and looks at the parasite card, then the parasite reveals and can take the looker's card, the card in the middle, and the parasite card, look at them, and then rearrange them however the player wishes, with all cards being returned face down. The purple cards are the outsiders. These tend to be worth fewer victory points, and each of the outsiders except for the mercenary will conflict with a killer or a MORPHO ID. The investor is trying to bet on whether MORPHO or the killers win the round. By taking the invest active ability, the investor takes the red and blue cubes and then secretly keeps one of them in hand, hoping that that team is the winner. If successful, the investor earns 2 points, and the investor cannot be eliminated by any means once the card is revealed. The extremist's active ability is to detonate 3 bombs. One at a time, the extremist identifies another player's ID and eliminates it right away, without the ability to be guarded. Players should stop and check for any win conditions after each of the bombs is exploded. The extremist wins the game if 3 or more deserters are eliminated. The spy works much like the psionics player, but is only trying to identify all the MORPHO players, not every player in the game. The spy will take the active ability Report to try to guess all of the MORPHO identities, and will earn 2 points if successful, while all other players earn 1 point if the spy is unsuccessful. Finally, the Mercenary is a special card which is used only in the 3 to 6 player game, and it doesn't have its own win condition. Instead, it comes with an active ability called Assassinate, which you can use to eliminate an adjacent ID card. The assassination cannot be guarded. You should use the Mercenary's ability to best help your other ID card to win on its win condition. And that's how to play MORPHO.
Check out the project page of MORPHO. We'll put the link in the description below so you can check it out. If you find this video useful, please help us by hitting that like button and subscribe to the Dice Tower if you haven't already done so.
And if you have any questions, comments or feedback, please leave that in the comments section below.
Thanks for watching and see you next time.